For myself, 2023 has been a season of close calls, one right after another, after another, after another, after another. I suppose you could say it's been my best, worst season ever, but either way, I've had a lot of fun and a lot of great encounters, just not one that's ended with a tag being punched. At this point, with just a couple days left in the season, I'm headed back out to hopefully put a late season deer on the ground before the clock runs out. Well, I'm headed out for the afternoon hunt here. I've got a day and a half left here in the season in South Dakota, trying to fill my bow tag. Had a lot of good encounters and close calls all the way through about November, but here the late season has been pretty tough. Been a bit of a grind. And this morning I went out to a spot where I had an encounter with several bucks back in November, and I didn't see anything at all this morning, except for one nuthatch. That was the most exciting thing that I saw. So for the afternoon, I'm heading to a spot that I've hunted for the past few seasons here. But then also, I figured I would just take the time today to go over my saddle hunting setup, show you the gear that I use, and then more specifically how I set up for self-filming when hunting out of the saddle. Okay, getting geared up for the afternoon here. The saddle that I use is the tethered lockdown. That's our new saddle for this year. I've been using the Phantom in the past, and it's a little bit heavier, a little bit bigger than the Phantom, but it's got a lot of features that I really like with the built-in pouches. The zippers are a one-handed operation. I've spent a lot of time in it this fall, and it's been a super comfortable saddle. Really enjoyed hunting out of that. So platform that I use is the tethered Predator XL. Even though it's a little bit heavier than the regular Predator platform, I just like having the extra real estate to work with if you're trying to maneuver, and especially if you've got a deer that comes in behind you in a kind of a tough spot, you can turn around and stand on it, with your back to the tree as like a traditional tree stand. So I like having that extra space to work with. Then for the sticks that I use, these are the tethered 1 sticks, incredibly light. If you're carrying 3 or 4 sticks, you're only talking 3 or 4 pounds. Another thing I really like about it is how long the rope is. And I've hunted out of some really big trees, especially cottonwood trees and big oak trees. Your average stick or attachment system that you're just not going to get around it, or you'd have to use 2 of them, or you'd have to bring a ratchet strap or something like that. So I love the fact that the ropes are real long, and get around big trees, and the attachment method is super quick to use. Okay, the pack that I used is Eberly Stock X2, and then I've added some of the M2 pouches onto the pack itself. Just gives you a little bit extra capacity and organization with your pack, which I really like this setup. So get it packed up here and get headed in. Well, believe it or not, this is actually still the same day. The spot that I was hunting this morning is covered in snow. Here it is a few hours later, 25 miles away, and there's virtually no snow on the ground. Got this steep hill to go up. But there's a alfalfa field just right down below here. So just pretty simple bed to food pattern that I'm gonna hunt tonight, or at least I hope there's a pattern. So I'll be curious once I get up in here to see if there's any fresh sign. I've been seeing a few tracks on the way in, but nothing crazy. That's the tree right there. Go ahead and get set up here. All right, so earlier I talked about the saddle gear that I'm using. Now I'll just kind of walk you through how I set up to self-film. So I've got 2 different ropes that I use. I've got one attached to my bow, and the other, a heavier duty rope attached to my backpack. I've got the platform attached to my saddle on an S-hook on my right side. On my left side, I've got sticks. Okay, I'm secured into my tether. Next thing I'm going to do is put the his strap on here, and then pull my backpack up and pull my bow up. Okay, so I got my bow up here, arrow nocked, ready to go. Got my backpack hanging here, and now I'm going to take the camera base and arm out and put that on. All right, I've got the main camera set up and ready to go. Now I'm going to get the 360 camera base and arm out, and then get that mounted, and then be pretty much ready to go. Everybody has their own way that they like to set up the tree, but I'm going to show you how I have things laid out here. As far as my backpack, I keep it low and to my right. A lot of people will put their his strap up a little bit higher and have their backpack hanging down, but I like to have mine kind of down low, out of the way, so there's no way that it's ever going to get in the way of the camera or in the way of me getting a shot. So I've got the camera base set up at about a 90-degree angle, and depending on the size of the tree, it may be a little farther around, it may be a little bit closer to me, but this is usually how I have it set up, at about waist height. So I always make sure that I've got unobstructed movement for the camera arm. If I've got to film back to my left, this is where I expect the deer to come out. I think this is going to be my best shot. So depending on where the deer come from, I can film 360 degrees, no problem. So that's the main camera setup. And then I'm always running a 360 camera, which I have above me here, set up to where I control it with my phone. But anyways, that's how I set the cameras up. So typically I'm running at least 3, if not 4 cameras. So when I first started hunting and self-filming out of a saddle, I was a little bit apprehensive that I was going to be, just a little bit less effective at it. And obviously there's a learning curve. But over the course of 4 or 5 seasons now of hunting almost exclusively out of a saddle, I don't have anything against tree stands, but I love hunting and self-filming out of the saddle. Obviously the big push to moving towards the saddle setups, 5 or 6 years ago, was that we were adopting a more run and gun style of hunting, but our gear was super heavy and super bulky. I mean, it's kind of comical to look back at some of the footage at the amount of stuff that we carried.
I'm already tired of carrying this stand, and we're not even away from the truck yet. I know we look foolish out here. Look at all this stuff we got. It already sucks. The more I stand here, the more I wish I wasn't doing it.
But now hunting with the saddle setup, I showed you earlier how everything just fits in that pack. It's so much more compact and it weighs so much less than compared to what we used to run with, that it's just night and day difference. Like I said, it's just all about efficiency when you're trying to do 2 jobs at once. When deer's coming in, I've got my bow in my left hand, working the camera with my right hand. And one of the most important things about being able to do this all efficiently is having a zoom controller for your camera. Because with that, I can turn the camera off and on, I can press record, I can zoom in and out, I can focus or change the focus, and I can change the exposure. I can do everything off of that device right there. That allows me to always have my weapon in my hand and then be able to run the camera with my other hand. A lot of times you see people running mirrorless cameras. Most of them don't have the ability to accommodate a zoom controller like this, where it controls the important aspects of the camera that I just talked about. So if you're using a mirrorless camera, it puts you at such a disadvantage, because a lot of times it takes 2 hands to operate the camera. If you're having to change settings, it's way more difficult to self-film and get really good footage with a mirrorless camera as opposed to using a camcorder type camera. But anyways, I know that's a lot of talking. I'm ready to actually get to hunting here and pay attention to what's going on. But hopefully that at least gives you an idea of the gear that we use, the process of getting set up to self-film, and some of the thought process that goes into it as well, being able to capture as much of the hunt as you possibly can, as efficiently as you can. And that's the key word, is efficiency. When you're trying to do the job of 2 people at once in an intense, heart-pounding, adrenaline-pumping situation, things can go haywire really fast. So if you have your system really dialed in, it makes things a lot easier when you're under the pressure, when you're under pressure of that animal coming in, you're trying to get good footage and trying to get the shot at the same time. But I'll do another video in the off season sometime and really dive into detail on more of the camera stuff and the technical stuff and a lot of the thought process. But today I at least just wanted to give you an idea of the gear and kind of how we go about setting it up. So hopefully I get an opportunity this evening to put all this into practice. Well, that's pretty much going to wrap it up here for day 1 of my 2-day last hope to get a deer for this season. Saw that little buck come out an hour ago and thought, yeah,
probably gonna see some more deer tonight, but that has not been the case. Maybe tomorrow, have a change in luck and maybe arrow a deer. But that's how it goes. Late season hunting can be a grind. We'll see what happens tomorrow though.
Well, it is the new year. I'm headed out this afternoon. Actually, it's a little bit before noon right now. It's 11 o'clock. I'll let it warm up a little bit today, let the sun get up and soften the snow so I can walk and scout my way through the timber without crunching through the snow and just blowing everything out. So let everything get settled down for the morning, let it warm up a little bit. And now I'm gonna scout my way back into this piece, and I got a spot that stood out to me on the map, but obviously just gonna scout my way in and see what the sign says. The spot I want to get to is about 350 to 400 yards farther back in. Some of this open timber, there's some thicker, darker timber, and then there's some cut timber. So it's like 3 different gradients of timber come together. So far what I'm seeing is deer just coming out of the thick, working their way through here, going from patch to patch of whatever vegetation this is. It's got tons of little spikes on them. I'm not entirely sure what that is, but in here there's more droppings. Seeing a pretty good amount of sign. Some fresher tracks, droppings right there. All of this is nipped off. Elk track. There's deer mixed in with deer. See where they've been digging through here. There we go. A whole bunch of sign here. Some of this is elk. There's also deer tracks in here too, and pawing up the grass. There's also this green vegetation. I've seen patches of that. I think that's called bearberry. Pretty good trail right there. Definitely an increase of sign as I've gotten farther back in here to the spot that I want to get to. Now there's a deer down in there. It's like a doe and a fawn maybe, or 2 fawns. Just down there feeding. Just made it to the spot that I wanted to get to. Right behind me is where I found all that sign. Tracks, trails, droppings. You can see where they've been pawing through the snow. Been spending a lot of time just browsing in this area. This is right where I wanted to get, where this open timber kind of meets a dark timber right there, real thick, tall timber. And then right down below here, where those 2 deer just were, is all the shorter pines, but it's thick, and there's been some cut in there. There's just a lot of tracks and trails, sign coming right through here. Set up on the downwind side of that. Those 2 deer were just right down below here. Got to work their way off. I think this is it. This is where I'll make my stand. I'm set up and ready to go in a pretty good looking spot here. I like the setup. Got a lot of cover up in this tree and a lot of shooting opportunity out in front of me here. And this is what I'd mentioned earlier, how we've got this open timber that I walked through to get here. Got this opening right here where it's been cut. And then you've got thicker, more mature pines back in that direction. And then right here, you've got shorter pines. And there's quite a bit of either, deadfall or slash in there. And that's right where I saw those 2 deer when I got to the base of the tree, and I watched them kind of walk back in that direction. And just from the looks of the sign, they're primarily coming down out of that thick, dark timber, or they're coming out of these younger pines.
working their way out into the more open pines where they're, looks like they've been browsing, and then they're probably working their way off towards, you know, a meadow or a hayfield or something like that in the distance. So I've already seen a couple deer, which is a big improvement. First adult doe, or the first, you know, decent rack buck that gets within range. It's gonna be game on, because I'm literally down to the last few hours here. Definitely feels like a spot where you can see deer and get a shot at one. At least that's the hope. Otherwise, this can be a really boring video. Well, just got eyes on a deer that was running full tilt, being chased by a coyote. Ran right down through where I saw those deer earlier and where I expect the deer to come from. So, not great. Doesn't mean that the hunt's over by any means, but it definitely doesn't help. I saw that deer out of the corner of my eye, and I knew it was a deer being chased right away. But for a split second before I saw what it was like, well, this could be my first opportunity to see a mountain lion chasing a deer, but ends up that it was a coyote. But it was chasing it hard. I mean, I've seen a lot of deer-coyote interaction this year, hunting out on the prairie, but it's been a long time since I've seen an all-out chase like that. But we've got about an hour left here. Still plenty of time, but things are winding down here.
That is a heartbreaker right there. Got to within 23 yards.
Dang it, man. I got ahead of myself on that one. And all I had to do was step out a little bit farther to the right. I was gonna have an opening.
All right.
Oh, man. I don't know how many times you can get close and not get an arrow in one. Well, that's it. It's official. It's over. Felt good about the setup tonight, but it, as you can tell, it did not play out like I thought it would. But anyways, beautiful evening to be out in the woods here, hunting in the snow. It's tough, man. It was a grind. 2023 was a grind. Gonna head home and make a big old pot of tag soup. If you had a rough deer season, you're not alone. Thank you guys for following along in the good times and the bad. It's all part of it. That's deer hunting.